best parts of the NFL is how truly unpredictable it can be.
It's a short punt. Gibson on the return. Near side. I don't see any flags. Gibson inside the 30. It's the Jets. And he's going to go. Jets win it. Touchdown, rookie Xavier Gibson.
I mean, look at the videos that came out around this time last year, and you won't find someone telling you that the Texans would drop 45 points in a home playoff game under a rookie CJ Stroud. Not a soul in 2021 put the Bengals in the Super Bowl following Joe Burrow shredding his knee the year prior, and not a single person had the 2019 Titans upsetting the Patriots and #1 seeded Ravens to go to the AFC Championship game. As we all know, teams fly under the radar every year, and the only sure thing in football is that a couple of teams don't get the love they deserve for a variety of different reasons. So in today's video, we're going to look at the 6 most underrated teams in the NFL going into the 2024 season, and the #1 spot may shock you. Now, coming in at number 6, we have the Atlanta Falcons. And arguably, I think they should be at the bottom of this list because they should have probably won the NFC South last year. The only reason I think they didn't was because of game-losing interceptions and just blown opportunities against average teams stacked up, and they finished 2023 7-10. But when you look back at it, the division-winning Tampa Bay Buccaneers were only 9-8. If Atlanta had either a better quarterback or at least a competent head coach, they probably would have won that one extra game they needed to make the postseason. Instead, they had terrible play or coaching at both of those positions, and instead made a series of moves that have made them the overwhelming favorites in the AFC South this year.
They were badly coached and they were terribly quarterbacked last year. And if they have better coaching with average to slightly above average quarterback play, I think they are a legitimate Super Bowl contender in the NFC. That's right, I said it.
And I mean, the first thing first is whether you think that the Kirk Cousins contract is an overpay or not, he arguably has done more with a worse roster than the Falcons have done since the 28-3 loss in the Super Bowl. An accurate, good locker room guy like Kirk added to an offense loaded with talent like Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, plus an above-average offensive line has to be worth some more hype than it's getting. And the other key move was hiring Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris as the new head coach, replacing professional fantasy football hater Arthur Smith. Morris is defensive-minded, which is excellent for a team that has good pieces but needs to level up on that side of the ball. He also brought with him former Rams assistant Zach Robinson as his offensive coordinator, who should bring enough of the McVay scheme to complement the leadership and steering that Cousins will do. And I mean, when you add in a pair of solid defensive prospects that they picked up in the draft, and the fact that there were really no significant free agent losses, the Falcons should be able to ride a very tame schedule to the top of their division. And I mean, when you look around the NFC South, not much changed, or not many teams at least improved. The Bucs and my personal favorite team, Saints, are just running it back pretty much with the exact same rosters they had, really making no moves in the offseason. Shout out Dennis Allen for being the worst coach of all time, but that's a different video for a different time. And then meanwhile, you have the struggling Panthers, who I personally believe have one of the worst rosters, if not the worst roster in the NFL. Like, they're up there with just being, they might win one game this year if Bryce Young does not figure it out. So I mean, after the Falcons clean up their messy division and probably sweep all of them, or at least go 1-1 and beat all of them for the most part, they're at the mercy of playoff Kirk Cousins, and that can be a roller coaster. But if you don't see Atlanta as a playoff lock, I think you're really underestimating them. Now at number 5, it's tough to place the Los Angeles Chargers as an underrated team, as they're number 5 because they are super underrated right now, because they have a near zero chance of winning their division thanks to the presence of the current GOAT Patrick Mahomes and the dynasty of Kansas City. That being said though, the Chargers have a really good chance of making the playoffs and even getting a good playoff draw if they're like a 4 or 5 seed. And I mean, once they get in, as long as they remain healthy, they could go on a run. Like, looking at their division first, the Broncos and Raiders are both in rebuild mode, and both the Chiefs and Chargers should sweep them. Then pretty much it comes down to the rest of their schedule, which personally for me, I think is one of the top 5 easiest in the league when you look at it from head to toe. And considering how easy that schedule is, should give the Chargers enough leeway to shake off any rust that comes with a new head coach and offensive scheme. Regarding the new coaching staff, I challenge anyone to doubt that Jim Harbaugh will maximize his opportunity.
Well, look, you're talking about a guy who's won 70% of his games as an NFL coach, right? He's won a national championship. He took the 49ers to a Super Bowl. He's never really experienced any downfall. He can get people to follow him. He can get people to buy into a cause bigger than themselves. And when you do that, you become dangerous as a team. You don't have to be the most talented team. You have to be the most connected team. And I think what he's going to do is make them mentally tough. He'll make them physically tough. He'll make them understand that if we work hard, we'll get through this.
Bringing in Greg Roman and creating a clone of the 2022 Ravens is a bold move. However, that team was a playoff contender that almost defeated the Bengals with a backup quarterback. Just imagine what Roman and Harbaugh can achieve with a quarterback like Justin Herbert, who plays through cracked ribs in an offense perfectly tailored to their run-first strategy. Like, I might be crazy for saying this, but if the offense goes according to plan, Herbert might be a legit MVP candidate this season if he lives up to the hype and just keeps playing the way he has for the past couple of years. I mean, yes, that offensive staff did have to say goodbye to Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, and Corey Linsley, but those losses are overshadowing the great acquisitions and retentions the Chargers have managed to pull off thanks to GM Joe Orts. The new committee of Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Isaiah Spiller should more than cover the diminishing results they saw from Eckler last year. Bradley Bosman and number 5 overall pick Joe Alt will bolster the offensive line in a big way, and although Williams and Allen will be missed, DJ Shark and Ladd should be able to do plenty to fill the gaps when Herbert is asked to throw the ball. And really, I think that the Chargers are just really underrated right now because everybody saw what they had to let go this past offseason to kind of build the offense that Harbaugh wanted. But they're not recognizing that on the defensive side of the ball, they pretty much have kept all of those guys on that side, including Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, while building around their new offensive identity, which I think should work immediately. And as I said before, I don't think the Chargers are going to win the AFC West unless like Mahomes pretty much unless Mahomes gets injured. I just don't see them winning the AFC West, but I expect them to be a legit 5 or 6 seed once the playoffs do come around in January. The Eagles have been written off a little bit too much following last year's collapse, and I'm going to have a bigger breakdown about this later in the week, but for now, we're just going to talk about the surface level of this whole thing right now. Like, yes, the way last season did end, it's going to leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth, especially any Eagles fan, because we all know how crazy they are, but it looks to me like Philly and Howie Roseman have figured out a way to patch all of those holes in the offense and defense and almost get better when nobody's been paying attention to them. If we look back at last year, the Eagles just fell apart, giving away a division title due to back-to-back losses to end the season, mostly due to the fact of poor defense and just predictable offense, capped off by an injured Jalen Hurts throwing the 3rd most interceptions in the league.
Kellen Moore, man, look, you could not have more to work with here now in terms of the quality on the offensive line, the quality at the perimeter positions, the quality in the backfield at running back with Saquon, the quality of Jalen Hurts himself.
They were then picked apart in the wild card round by the Buccaneers 32-9. And after that loss, they also suffered one of the biggest offseason losses a team could have, losing their captain, one of the best centers ever, if not the best center ever, Jason Kelce, to retirement. And a lot of their fans saw all of the horrendous defensive performances they had last year and instead chose to back the Cowboys this season coming into 2024. But I don't know if that's really the right decision considering all the things that Dallas still has to deal with thanks to Jerry Jones and the 3 outstanding contracts that haven't been paid at this moment, at least of this video. Like, I mean, look, honestly, the situation that Philly's in right now, most teams I think would have nuked their entire team, or not maybe nuked it, but at least tried to get rid of some of their assets to maybe build more around Jalen Hurts in this offense. But strangely enough, it seems as if the front office of Philly was oddly prepared for all of this offseason stuff. Like, first of all, Kelce's retirement was on the horizon for a while, and Philly drafted his replacement in Cam Jurgens last year to get him ready for his incoming duties. As for their pitiful pass defense, they brought in Vic Fangio, who may not be a good head coach, but who can certainly pilot a defensive staff. And I think personally what excites me the most about the Eagles is that they brought in the 2, I'd say, best defensive backs from 2024 onto their team this year from the draft, as the league somehow let Toledo's Quinyon Mitchell slide to them and then traded up to steal Iowa's Cooper DeJean in the 2nd round.
Think about who they drafted too. They drafted Johnny Wilson out of Florida State. They drafted Nia Smith out of Texas A&M. Got to see both of those guys this year. Are you kidding me? In 5th, 6th round? These guys? I mean, these guys are absolute playmakers.
Yeah.
Playmakers, and they're getting them 5th and 6th round value. So for Kellen Moore, you got to figure out a way to put a plan in place to make sure that you're maximizing this talent and making it run efficiently for 17 weeks. Not up and down, efficiently with a nice steady progression on into the postseason. And then ultimately, look, the goals in Philadelphia is Super Bowl.
And now look, I know a handful of rookies won't fix all of their problems, so the Eagles also took big free agency swings, bringing in a longtime rival Saquon Barkley on a 2-year deal to help Jalen Hurts pilot the run game and bring back CJ Gardner-Johnson to lead the secondary after he was a major part of their 2022-2023 Super Bowl run. And I mean, to be honest, this Eagles roster looks as stacked as anybody's in the league right now. And I mean, on top of that too, they brought in Kellen Moore to be the OC of this team. So I mean, honestly, the arrow is pointing nowhere but up for this offensive unit and just the Eagles as a whole, in my opinion. Like, look, no team has won the NFC East in back-to-back years in over 2 decades, and the Cowboys look weak, especially as I said earlier, with 3 simultaneous contract disputes stalling their offense. The Eagles are back in the driver's seat, and I fully expect them to tush-push their way back into top contention. See what I did there? Now at number 3, I have one of the biggest boomer bust teams that I can recall from recent NFL history.
I'm going to say less, Greeny. As talented as they are, and I think they're Super Bowl contenders on paper, that paper in where it's written is in pencil.
Like the Jets, and I fully mean this too, the Jets are either going to fully self-destruct and just be terrible like they were last year because of all the injuries that they're going to face, or they're going to be like a 1 or a 2 seed in the AFC, I think.
I mean, you're banking on the health of Aaron coming back at his age off the Achilles. You're banking on the health of the left tackle Tyron Smith. We'll see what they do with the number 10 pick in the draft. You're banking on Mike Williams coming back from the ACL and playing and being what he was previous to that injury. So as much as I'm hopeful, I know that that surface isn't great in that stadium, and age and injury in the NFL usually doesn't bode well together.
And now look, I'm going to err on the positive side as I think that they had a great offseason, and though Aaron Rodgers might be a madman, he still is a 4-time MVP with a great team around him. The Jets managed to go 7-10 last season with one of the worst quarterback situations in football. Like if Rodgers hadn't blown out his Achilles in 3 snaps into the season, that team would have done most of the work for him, and we might be talking about the Jets as one of the most overrated teams coming into this year. And on top of all of this too, I think a lot of people are forgetting that Aaron Rodgers took a pay cut last year in order to give the Jets more flexibility to build around him, and in doing so, they've pretty much patched up all the holes on that offensive and defensive. I mean, they didn't really have to do much on the defensive side, I guess, but on the offensive side of the ball, that gave them enough money to patch all of those holes. Like, first of all, the greatest concern for the Jets since the beginning of the decade has been their offensive line, but they pulled out all the stops to ensure their quarterback safety as they drafted Olu Fashanu, trading with the Ravens for John Simpson, and then going on to sign Tyron Smith from Dallas and Morgan Moses from Baltimore. And like, I mean, along with all the faces they already had on that offensive line, now they just look fantastic. But let's get to the more exciting stuff now about just the skill positions in this defense. Like, the Jets already had one of the prettiest skill groups in defenses in the league, and now they have a competent player at quarterback. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and Tyler Conklin were already a great offensive unit, and now the Jets have added Mike Williams from the Chargers, who should add an extra level to their passing attack. And on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, not many moves had to be made to this already top 10 defense in the league. Like, people forget how good this defense is. Yes, Hassan Reddick does want a new contract and will need to be sorted out, but a D-line consisting of a newly acquired Javon Kinlaw, Quinnen Williams, and Jermaine Johnson is absolutely lethal. On top of that, once you look at all the stars dotting the back 7 from Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed to Michael Carter and CJ Mosley, the unit is lethal, especially under the already defensive coordinator and head coach Robert Saleh, who got the most out of this team even when the offense couldn't get any kind of momentum. It's incredible. And now, yes, I know it's hard to trust Nathaniel Hackett with an offense, but Aaron Rodgers will be calling the shots. Let's be real. Like, Nathaniel Hackett's just there to sign up as the head coach, I guess, or as the offensive coordinator, I guess, not as anything else really. And I mean, straight up, the AFC East could not be more ripe for the taking. With the Bills in flux after losing Stephon Diggs and several free agents, and the Dolphins' inability to play on the road after November, the Jets have a real opportunity to pull themselves off the bottom and contend. But now my number 2 team, I think, is heavily underrated right now. Yes, they're getting a lot of hype because of their quarterback, but besides that, not many teams are realizing how good this team can be. The Washington Commanders deserve more love this year for a few reasons, and the biggest is that we haven't seen this team without Dan Snyder at the helm in 25 years. And now, yes, I know that the team was sold before the 2023 season, but Josh Harris really didn't nuke the whole thing until this year and buy into the rebuild. And another thing that I really think is just the big reason of why this team is heavily underrated is because if you look at the AFC and the NFC compared, the NFC is just completely wide open, and this young roster has a chance to make some big jumps like similar teams last year, like the Texans in the AFC or even the Packers last year in the NFC. They got in because the NFC is just so wide open. And I mean, the final and most important reason that I think the Commanders are off of rock bottom though is because this 2024 Commanders team doesn't look anything like the team that had just 4 wins and 8 straight losses to end last season. From my estimations, there are at least 10 new starters on the Commanders coming into this year, including big additions like Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner, and offensive lineman Tyler Beisday, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm probably wrong on how to say his name, and Nick Allegretti. Again, correct me on my name in the comments because I know I pronounced it wrong. Cap space was bountiful for Washington, and they spent a lot to turn their fortunes around. Their draft class was also full of potential starters, and interior defender Johnny Newton being the biggest defensive pickup. Another big change was the move from Ron Rivera to Dan Quinn. And while it is sad to see Rivera go, the game has kind of gotten away from him, as Dan Quinn and his staff will be good for developing the new look Commanders. Quinn's defensive expertise should help mend the Commanders' biggest need, as even when Sam Howell turned into one of the NFL passing yard leaders and scored heavily, the defense could not keep up with Washington in games. Roster updates and a new scheme should help pick up much more slack. And the leader of this new Washington team will be none other than the number 2 overall pick quarterback Jaden Daniels, the 2023 Heisman winner out of LSU. I mean, his physical tools already have some putting him on the level of Lamar Jackson's raw talent. And I mean, whether that's lofty or not, when you go back and watch the film, and yes, I do sometimes go back and forth whether I think this kid's going to be a bust or if he's just going to be great, is when you look at the tape, even though 50% of his plays were fade routes, it's hard to see that he won't be successful in the NFL. Like, I'm hoping he is good, but for me, it's just so tough to go back and forth between him. I think they have as good of a chance as anyone to make a surprise run in the NFC, and if it weren't for the rookie quarterback wildcard, they'd be number 1 on the list. But I think Washington has finally gotten off rock bottom, and their ascension is imminent. And now for number 1, my pick for the most underrated team in football going into 2024 is the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals had the 4th worst record in football in 2023, and yet they're in a position to take a massive leap forward this season. The biggest reason for their 4-13 year was quarterback play, as they didn't have Kyler Murray until week 10, as he still was recovering from knee surgery. After he recovered though, I mean, the dude looked crazy once he finally came back. He quickly flashed his franchise talent and earned the Cards 3 of their 4 season wins in just 7 games, capped off by a great week 17 win over the Eagles. And look, I mean, they did lose games while he was in, but several of their losses down the stretch were also to solid teams, including the Rams, Seahawks, and 49ers. And look, I think a lot of people are underrating this team right now because of how many wins they had last year, and that's really what just people are going off of. Also, the questions remaining around Kyler Murray, but I think he's going to prove everybody wrong this season. Like, as crazy as this might sound, I think they're going to be the team that pulls off the most upsets this year. First of all, we all underestimated Jonathan Gannon as the new head coach of the Cardinals. Like, yes, he may not be as big a podium presence, but if you watch the in-season Hard Knocks, he's done a good job of getting his guys to buy in, which is why they were so competitive in games long after they were eliminated from the postseason. Next, I like all the pieces that they've added around Kyler Murray, signing Jonah Williams to cover across from Paris Johnson Jr. on the offensive line, while also acquiring a metric ton of weapons. James Conner will be sticking around as Murray's tailback, but Arizona also drafted Trey Benson from Florida State, who will contribute quickly. And in the receiving room, where the only returning starters are Greg Dortch and tight end Trey McBride, the Cardinals did the most they could, signing Zay Jones in free agency and drafting a little-known prospect named Marvin Harrison Jr. at the number 4 overall pick. Like, straight up for me, Harrison is going to be incredible out of the gates, and the other acquisitions on the offensive side of the ball should all chip in to greatly improve a unit that showed glimpses of something great last season. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, I'm not going to act like they're going to be the steel curtain, but the Cardinals took swings signing big free agents like defensive tackle Justin Jones out of Chicago, cornerback Sean Bunting from Tennessee, and linebacker Mac Wilson from New England. They also drafted Darius Robinson, a stud edge rusher out of Missouri, and Max Melton, a solid quarterback prospect from Rutgers. Like, in truth, I just don't see how the Cardinals got any worse this past offseason. If anything, they got so much better, and I think are legit contenders, and as crazy as it might sound, might win the NFC West this year. I think the Niners might collapse a little bit. Like, I mean, thanks to their cap space and solid drafting, the Cardinals are in position to take a big leap. As Seattle is shackled to Geno Smith at quarterback, the Rams are trying to replace Aaron Donald, and the 49ers try to figure out who is starting at wide receiver. The Cardinals have an established team identity and several new players for the dynamic athlete of a signal caller to play play with. Like hell, I'll just say it. Kyler Murray might be actually a big dark horse to win MVP this year if the dude can actually make the Cardinals something this season. So there you have it. Those are my top 6 teams that I believe are underrated this season in the 2024 season. And to be honest, I personally do think that all of these teams are going to be in the playoff hunt throughout the entire season, and who knows, maybe one of these teams will even surprise everybody and go and make a playoff run and somehow get to the Super Bowl. It'd be kind of sick if the Cardinals did it. I'm from Arizona. That'd be kind of sick. I'm not a Cardinal fan though, as you can see, but that would be sick. They need some stuff. But if anybody's going to make a run into the Super Bowl, I would probably say it's going to be the Eagles or maybe even the Falcons. I think the Falcons might be legit, and especially that their division is just a complete cakewalk because of just how bad every team is in the NFC South. But as always, I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below. Who do you think are some of the most underrated teams this year? And tell me why too. I want to know what you guys thinking. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one.